Chapter 22. There was life in him, and the life was the light of people. The Gospel of John. Once on my request, Anastasia took me to see the ringing cedar, the one her great-granddad and granddad had spoken about. It was not far away from the clearing. It was a 40-meter-high tree that towered a little above the neighboring ones. The distinctive feature of it was its crown. It looked as if it was illuminated, producing a halo around itself exactly like those they depict around the images of saints on icons, though its halo was pulsating. At the very top of the tree, one could see a beam that was directed into cosmic infinity. The sight was extraordinarily fascinating, and it cast a spell. I followed Anastasia's suggestion and pressed my palm against its trunk. I felt vibration or crackling, which could be compared with that which we can hear when under a high-voltage line, though this one was more resonant. You know, it was me who had found out, only by chance, how to send its accumulated energy back to the cosmos, and after that to send it back scattering it all over the earth. Anastasia reported to me, "Do you see the marks on the trunk?" At the very places, it was debarked by she-bear, which was dragging me climbing up the tree. I tell you, I could hardly manage to make her do it, taking me to the first branches. I took a strong grip on the back of her neck. She was climbing up and howling and climbing. That was the way I had managed to reach the first branches, and then it was easy for me to climb, moving up from branch to branch. So I went on till I reached the top of the cedar. I stayed there for 2 days. I tried everything possible. Whatever came to my mind, now I was comforting the tree by stroking its trunk. Then I started to shout, directing my sound upwards, but nothing seemed to work. Then my granddaddy and great-granddaddy came. Can you imagine what kind of show was happening here at that time? They were standing under the tree speaking strictly to me, demanding me to climb down. I, in turn, was demanding from them instructions on what to do, how to handle the problem, but they would not. My granddaddy, can you imagine, decided to trick me by promising his help in setting up contact with a woman with whom I had failed to contact. I did want to help her very much. I realized that before he used to get irritated and even angry at me because, as he said, I was wasting my time on her instead of minding my own business and doing something else. I knew for sure that he was not able to help me because my great-granddaddy had tried twice and failed too. Although my granddaddy did not know about it, as we kept it secret from him. Then my granddaddy completely lost his temper. A twig started running around the cedar, switching the twig and screaming at me that I was the most stubborn, muddle-headed one in the family. He said that my behavior was illogical. I could not perceive wise advice, and he would educate by beating me with twigs on my behind. All those speeches and actions he accompanied by whipping the air with his twig. It was so funny, and even my great-granddad could not help but laugh. I was shouting with laughter too. At that moment somehow, I broke the top branch and luminescence came out of it. I heard my great-granddaddy's voice become profoundly serious with a shade of demanding, and at the same time pleading, "Please, don't touch anything else, my grandchild, come down, be careful, take your time, you have done it already." I followed his advice and came down. My great-granddaddy hugged me silently. I could feel that he was trembling. Then he pointed to the cedar, and one could see that all its twigs were starting to illuminate light. Then a small beam was created and went away high up into infinity. My great-granddaddy explained to me that the beam had been created at the very place I was shouting upwards, creating a kind of channel for the energy. Then he told me that if I had touched that small beam that was coming out of the broken twig, my brain would have exploded. It happened because that tiny beam had a lot of powerful energy and information, and that was why my dad and mama had perished. For a while Anastasia was silent, and then she continued her story. They had found a similar ringing cedar. Only my mama was doing everything differently because she did not know. She climbed a nearby tree, which was smaller, reached the bottom branch of the ringing one, half broke it, and accidentally lighted herself with it. The branch was directed downwards, and the beam went into the earth. It is bad, it is very harmful when this kind of energy gets into the earth. When my dad came, he saw the beam and my mama hanging on one hand having a death grip on the branch of the regular cedar. The branch of the ringing cedar was in the other grip. My dad realized everything. He climbed the ringing one and reached its top. My granddaddy and great-granddaddy were watching him breaking the top twigs, but they would not illuminate. Meanwhile, the lower ones were illuminating brighter and brighter. Later, my great-granddad told me that my dad had understood that if he had only stayed a bit longer, he would have never been able to come down, but the long-awaited beam, which should have gone upwards with its pulsating illumination, would not appear. Although the tiny beams which were directed downwards were growing in number. The beam directed upwards appeared only when my dad had half broken a big branch directed upwards. It did not start illuminating right away, so he had to bend it, directing it towards himself. When it flashed out, he could not manage to unclasp his hands, and the beam of the straightened-out branch was directed into the sky. Then a pulsating halo was created. The great-granddaddy said that Dad's brain was able to receive a huge flow of energy and information at the very last moment of his life. Somehow that energy could clean his brain from all kinds of information that had been loaded in it before. That was why he could gain time just enough to unclasp his hands before the brain explosion had taken place and direct the branch upwards. Anastasia rubbed the cedar's trunk with her hands, pressed her cheek against it, and stood still smiling, trying to catch the tree's vibrating sound. Anastasia, is the oil from cedar nuts stronger or weaker than the pieces of the ringing cedar wood? The same. If the nuts are harvested at the proper time, and in a certain proportion to a cedar tree, when it gives them of itself. Do you know how to do it? Yes, I do. Will you tell me? All right. I will. Chapter 23. It is necessary to change one's own world outlook. I asked Anastasia about the woman who caused the conflict between Anastasia and her granddad. I asked why she could not make contact and set up a relationship with that woman, and what did she need it for. You see, Anastasia started her explanation. It is particularly important when two persons join their lives into one based on spirituality, bondage, and attraction. Unfortunately, most of the time, everything starts from carnal desires. Well, for example, you had seen a beautiful girl, and a desire for intimacy came to you. Although it does not mean that you have seen a real personality, the soul itself. Very often people join their destinies led only by carnal attraction. This does not last long. So they switch over to another one. What connects people then? It is not an overly complicated task at all to find your soulmate with whom you can find real happiness. Although in your technocratic world there are a lot of obstacles to it. The woman I am seeking contact with lives in a large city, regularly goes to the same place to work. Over there or on her way to that place, there is a man who is her soulmate. They are very closely related spiritually. She could be incredibly happy with him, and, what is of most importance, they could have a child who would be able to bring a lot of good to the world. You know, Vladimir, they would be able to create it in the same impulse we did. This man cannot find a way to express his feelings to this woman, and some extent it creates the problem. Can you imagine, when he is looking at her face, he recognizes subconsciously his soulmate. On her part, as soon as she feels somebody's gaze she strains to try as if by chance, to pull her skirt higher or something like that. By doing it she provokes a carnal desire, but he does not know her well enough, or they have never been introduced to one another. Anyhow, this is the reason that he goes to the one who is more familiar, closer to him, and available for him to satisfy his carnal feelings. I would like to prompt this woman on how to behave, but I cannot get through to her. Her brain is never opened, even for a moment, to realize the message and information involved. It is completely preoccupied with everyday problems. Can you imagine? I was watching her once all day and night long. It is terrible. My granddaddy was blaming me for ignoring my work with Docniks, and in general for scattering myself. He said that I was wasting my time and poking my nose into something that had nothing to do with me and my business. The first thought which would come to her on awakening in the morning. What to eat, instead of being happy and welcoming the coming day. She gets upset just because the food she would like to have is not available. Then she gets frustrated as she does not have enough of something that women usually put on their face in the morning. It is cream or colors. Her mind is always busy trying to figure out the way to get it. She is always late and in a hurry. She is always afraid to miss this or that means of transportation. At the place where she comes, usually her mind is overloaded and, to be more precise, to my mind, by all kinds of nonsense. She is trying to keep the appearance of being preoccupied with business matters and minding the job she is supposed to do. Nevertheless, she is thinking about her girlfriend, or just an acquaintance, and she is having a feeling of irritation towards her. At the same time, she is trying to listen to everything they are talking about. Can you believe, this is her routine, which is repeated from day to day, as if she were a clockwork toy. When she is back at home, and if somebody can see her, she keeps the look of a woman, but she is thinking again about all kinds of colors. When at a store she takes a good look at the clothes, and mainly that kind which recovers her alluring charms, if they would work a miracle, though in reality in her case everything goes quite the contrary. When back home again she starts house cleaning. She believes that she is enjoying a rest while staring at a television set. Say messes about with food, and the most important thing of all is that she thinks about something good only for a moment. She goes to bed and again, she cannot just leave her troubles alone. Is not it something? She never lets them go. If she could only try to let them go only for a minute during the daytime, and try to think. Wait a minute, Anastasia, will you explain, please, what do you imagine her appearance should look like? I mean her clothes, and what exactly should she think at the very moment, when that man is nearby? What does she need to do so that he would be able to open his heart to her? Anastasia told me everything in detail, though I am going to tell you only the main idea as I see it. Anastasia said she should wear a dress a little bit below her knees, not a low-necked one with a white collar, and be almost without makeup. She should learn to listen to the speaker who is communicating with her with great attention and interest. Is that all? I asked, being surprised to hear such a simple explanation. And Anastasia's reply sounded like follows. There is a lot behind these simple things. To choose the right dress, put on her makeup differently, and look at a person without false interest, she should change her world outlook.